الاميركي السابق في بيروت ديفيد هيل. صحيح أن الدبلوماسي الأمريكي المخضرم لم يعد يتحدث باسم الإدارة الأمريكية الحالية، لكن في جعبة الرجل الكثير من المعلومات، وهو ملم بتفاصيل الشأن اللبناني منذ ثمانينيات القرن الماضي. فماذا يقول اليوم عن نتائج الانتخابات النيابية، وماذا عن تشكيل الحكومة المقبلة، ولماذا اعتبر أن الوضع اللبناني مقبل على شلل سياسي؟ مرحبا بك حضرة السفير على شاشة الجديد. اسمح لي بداية في السؤال الأول، على عكس كثيرين اعتبرت أن نتائج الانتخابات النيابية قد تؤدي إلى شلل سياسي على الرغم من فوز عدد كبير من المستقلين في هذه الانتخابات.
First of all, thank you, Ramez. It's great to see you, and thanks for the opportunity to have this conversation. I think it's important to be realistic about the constraints in Lebanon's political system and the way of governance. And while there were some very interesting new developments in these elections in terms of the independents winning in many seats and some of the changes in terms of the votes in the Christian community, overall, I do believe that there is a great risk that Lebanon will continue to endure the paralysis that it has suffered for these so many years.
بالحديث عن المستقلين، هل برأيك هم قادرون اليوم على إحداث خلق في اللعبة السياسية وتحقيق إصلاحات معينة؟
Well, it's up to them and how they perform when they go into Parliament. It will depend on what kind of coalition takes the majority share in Parliament and whether they're a part of that. But again, there are only, as I understand it, about 13 of them. And while that's a significant improvement upon the past in terms of the presence of independence, it's really not enough on its own to make a difference. But they can definitely have their say. A lot will count on whether they are able to unite and compromise, which are two words that are often missing in situations like this.
يبدو أن الأمور في لبنان متجهة إلى انتخاب الرئيس نبيل بري. هل برأيك أن هناك تمايز بين بري وحزب الله؟
Well, it's not for me to get into those questions. They're obviously closely allied. They have the same coalition list that they run on in the elections. Shia seats are all, I think, held, as I understand it, by these two parties. But we view Hezbollah as its own entity, and it is a terrorist organization, as you know, from the point of view of the United States.
المتحدث باسم الخارجية الاميركية ديفيد دعا المجلس النيابي الجديد إلى الإسراع في تشكيل حكومة لإنقاذ الاقتصاد. برأيك هل حكومة جديدة قادرة اليوم على إنقاذ الاقتصاد، وأي نوع من حكومة هي قادرة على تحقيق ذلك؟
As I've mentioned in other settings, there are structural challenges because the way the national pact works and the Constitution is to ensure that no one community has a veto over can control the others. So governments have a hard time functioning in the best of circumstances. These are not the best of circumstances. But I am impressed that up until now there has been good work done between the authorities in Lebanon and the IMF. There's a good set of reforms that are on the table. Some require legislation, some require simply actions by the government. The first and most pressing thing to do is to restore confidence in the fiscal sector and stabilize the currency and the finances of the government and of the country. And that's possible, and that can help unlock the support of the IMF and other creditors. But it's going to require tough decisions by a government, which will require the support of Parliament, and that's, I think, going to be very, very challenging.
إذن بناء على نتائج هذه الانتخابات، إلى أي مدى برأيك سيكون سهل تشكيل حكومة جديدة؟
Well, it's always been hard in Lebanon, as you know, to form a government. There often are long periods of a caretaker situation. I think the challenge today is that there's a very narrow gap between the majority and minority in the cabinet, so that's a challenge. The other challenge is that to form a government, it has to represent each of the communities, as you know, in Lebanon, Shia, Sunni, Christian, and Druze, with the right proportions. And so I think there is probably a big ideological gap between the Christians who have won this time and the Shia vote, which of course is still voted for Hezbollah. And I think that will be a major element of competition in formation of a cabinet that includes representative Shia.
برأيك ما هو الدور الذي من الممكن أن يلعبه المجتمع الدولي في الضغط لتشكيل حكومة، لا سيما أنه يكثر الحديث اليوم عن مؤتمر تأسيسي للبنان؟
Well, even though, as you said, I don't speak for the administration at all, I think that Ned Price got it right in saying that we as outsiders should encourage rapid formation of the government because of the dire circumstances facing Lebanon and its economic and humanitarian crisis. But it's not up to us in any way or any other foreign element to pick and choose or define what flavor of the government the Lebanese want. We want a government that we can work with and that will implement these reforms on an urgent basis, and that can then lead to the unlocking of support from the IMF and from the international donor community. How that is structured and whether there are gatherings to accomplish that or not is I think, yet to be determined, and not that important. The important thing now is a government that can actually implement the necessary reforms that can turn the corner.